A mask and a bottle of sanitizer isn't exactly the look most people want on a first date. But for those seeking love or companionship as this pandemic drags on, it's also increasingly clear that if you're single, you can't just wait it out. Where does that leave people, and what does dating in the time of COVID look like? Let's find out with, from Summerland, BC, Marianne Fisher, professor of psychology at St. Mary's University in Halifax, and here in Ontario's capital city, in the Lakeview neighborhood, Natasha Sharma, relationship expert at NKS Therapy and co-founder of the online mental health education course, The 8-Hour Therapist. And in North York, Rebecca Liang, a graduate student at Ryerson University who has been dating in this very unusual time. Welcome to you all. Happy to have you here on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Marianne, I'm going to start with you because I think there are people watching this and thinking, you know, we are in a pandemic. Why would you date in a pandemic? Stay home, stay safe. Why do you think it's important for us to have this conversation?
We're a social species and we don't want to be alone. And the reality is that when we're scared or when things are uncertain, we want to be with other people. And I think that the pandemic is really showing us that being home alone all the time is not healthy for us. So, you know, pandemic or no pandemic, we can't change who we are fundamentally in terms of wanting to be with others and wanting to attach and be close and form those highly companionship relationships. So it might not be ideal from a public health point of view, but we're human.
Well, you're actually conducting a nationwide survey on how the pandemic is affecting dating. What are you trying to find out from Canadians in this survey?
Right. So I think it's a fun survey because I'm in the really luxurious spot of being someone who has studied dating and mating and sexuality for a number of years now. So half of the survey deals with things like, what do you think your dating value is in the local mating market? Or what sorts of things do you consider in terms of forming sexual relationships? What kind of relationship are you actually seeking? Or relationships, plural, you never know. And I've been looking at individual assessments. The other half of the survey, though, is dealing specifically with the pandemic. So it's things like during lockdown, did you try to improve yourself in some way? Did you try to pick up some new skills or not? And what sort of things do you think your mating rivals have been doing? So basically, it's this idea of, do you think the playing field has been fair? So while you've been locked down and doing all the quarantining and everything, do you think someone else is going after those potential mates that you may be interested in? And it's been very interesting to do this work so far.
So what have you found so far? What have you found the impact of the pandemic on dating? What's it been?
Yeah, so we're trying not to dive too deep into the data because it is still open. We're kind of, to be honest, it sounds a bit pessimistic, but we're waiting to see how the second wave impacts on dating, and we want to see how longitudinally that carries out. But what I can tell you so far, there's two real significant things to share. One is that when you ask Canadians, what skills have you picked up on a sex and dating survey? As a researcher, you rather expect a little bit of relationship stuff in terms of, you know, I enhanced my body, I worked out, things like that. And it's not. It's actually much bigger. And the two that were most significant in terms of skills, Canadians said that they improved their communication skills and they've improved their problem solving. And I was really impressed by that. That was something I hadn't really considered. The other thing that we found was a general shift from people wanting basically an opportunistic approach to dating. So if the right person comes along, yeah, I might have a long-term relationship, but otherwise it's just going to be short-term hookups. We've gone from that to people seeking companions, to seeking long-term and wanting to have that deeper, more meaningful type of relationship. And that's really important to us as social psychologists.
And Natasha, just to pick up on what Marianne said, do you think that the pandemic is taking us back to the days of courtship?
I don't know what it might be taking us back to, but it seems to be taking us forward. Definitely, I agree that there is a trend towards people who are focusing more on what's meaningful. And a situation like this, which is unprecedented, does tend to get us cognitively focusing on what's most important, whether we're directly aware of that or not. And so there is an increasing trend towards dating and finding partners with intention and less of a focus on um, more casual types of interactions. And I think that's certainly influenced by 2020 and all that has come with making the adjustments that we have. This type of event has really uh, kicked us into back into understanding what is deeply important at the end of the day, like when everything is said and done. And we know, as experts in psychology, we know that meaningful, deep connections are strongly correlated with our mental health and our well-being and our sense of happiness.
Well, you said a word I want to pick up on. You said intention. Do you think that
Hmm.
maybe this pandemic is changing? Do you think that if, in the after times, I don't want to speak too soon, but in the after times, it will actually have like a long-term positive effect or negative effect?
Potentially. I mean, it could have a long-term effect, especially because it's lasting quite a significant period of time. We aren't going to make any changes from the way we're living anytime soon. I think we're in this for at least another year or two, maybe more. And because of the duration of time that we're all being asked to make significant adjustments to our lives and sort of have that overlying mentality of focusing on what's important and understanding, what's meaningful to you and what really brings value to you in your life at the end of the day, that actually could have a very lasting effect because it's going to be a long period in all of our stories at the end of the day.
And Rebecca, at the beginning of the conversation, I mentioned that you have been dating during this. How did the pandemic change things for you?
Oh, well, for me, I think it definitely put a really large emphasis on communication, especially online now, because I personally don't really like to go out and meet people during these times. I just don't think it's the safest thing to do. But that also comes with its own set of difficulties. For example, I believe that conversation flows a lot better in person because there is that back and forth in real time. But once you switch on to online communication, you can walk away from your phone. You can choose to ignore messages. Sometimes when you're speaking online, things can get misinterpreted. So definitely navigating online communication in terms of building a meaningful connection has been a learning curve.
Say you were to go out and meet somebody during this, what would you need to consider to keep yourself safe?
The first thing I would consider is location. So personally, anything outside, anything within enclosed spaces just seems a little bit risky to me, and that's just a no-go. Um, and possibly just social distancing, but I wouldn't say 6 feet apart because that seems a little bit unrealistic when you're out on a date. Um, but I guess just keeping the guidelines in mind. You're sanitizing your hands, you're wearing a mask in public places.
Natasha, during this pandemic, you would think that, the support of your community is more important, but we can't do that. We can't just hang out with our friends and pass the days together. Do you think that in a pandemic, it has made finding a partner that much more important?
I do, either at a very conscious and intentional level or on a maybe a deeper subconscious level. I do think people are focusing more on because when we're without something, it of course shines a spotlight on just how meaningful it actually is in our lives.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
I do, some research has actually shown that 6 out of 10 people actually are comfortable with meeting people online. And certainly, I'm sure that I haven't seen the data on whether there's been a surge in video dating versus just texting and sort of messaging, but I'm sure that's the case. And I think people are becoming more open and maybe a less cynical. I think my experience has been prior to the pandemic that when it comes to finding companionship online, or just finding companionship long term, a more meaningful connection, there's been almost a little bit of a negative or cynical view. And I think that this has created a more if not more positive or optimistic view, at least less bitter, and I think more openness and more hopefulness around the possibility of forming a lasting connection in some way.
Would you even say that it's created a lifeline? Because if we didn't have online dating options, people might be more reckless to meet in person?
Potentially, I agree with what Marianne said. We have a very strong drive as humans. We have a very strong drive to and desire to connect with other people and to form relationships and attachments. So, yeah, I think in a lot of ways, technology has been a very good thing in that regard because it gives us an option. It gives us a medium to do this safely. It gives us an option to establish some form of connection. I still do believe in-person connection is sort of the gold standard and eventually, but this is definitely a way to do things safely and to still have this quality aspect of your life and not have to give it up entirely.
Rebecca, I don't really want to get into your business, but I have to ask, has the pandemic made it more important for you to find a partner?
Personally, no. My, I guess, motivation has stayed the same level as pre-pandemic. I think just method of communication and how forming that meaningful connection that has changed.
And Marianne, we're entering what the kids, I can't believe I'm going to say this on the agenda, what the kids called cuffing season. Is there any indication that people's interest in companionship is a shift in life priorities or just a means to get through what could potentially be a very long and lonely winter ahead?
That's a great question, and honestly, I don't think we have the data to tell us that. But what I can say is that the online dating companies are reporting what they call an extended cuffing season in place. So their busy time of year tends to be starting up around Labor Day, and it carries through until late February, and especially Boxing Day till about Valentine's Day. That tends to be the prime cuffing season. And they're reporting right now that rates in the early September, even July, going back as far as July, were on par with February for number of messages, number of people signing up for memberships, revenue generation. And who knows whether this is going to be a long-lasting impact in terms of what people want or not. But I do think it's important to recognize that people are shifting in what they're willing to do. So, for example, many online dating companies are reporting that their clients are more open and flexible about what kind of relationship they're looking for, or they've loosened the restrictions about their preferences, so what they want in a mate. And just to echo what was mentioned earlier, they're also reporting about 10% a year ago would say, yes, I would like a one-on-one video chat feature in a dating app. That's up to over 70%. So there is a huge change in how technology is impacting meeting potential mates. And I think that in itself is really going to have some interesting ramifications down the road.
I think it's really interesting what you just said about maybe a year ago, people might want 10 things on the list, but then now that may take 5 things on the list. What is that suggesting to us?
For me, and based on the research background I have, what that says to me is that people are less likely to go, okay, the one I want to be with has these idealized qualities. I think people are being much more realistic about what those core fundamental things are that they actually need in a long-term lasting relationship. And I think it's not so much a settling as a really deeper insight into what a relationship means to them and what they would like to have in their life, especially if there's a second wave, right? Like that's the big concern that a lot of daters are saying is they want to make sure that they're with somebody in a good relationship and that they really don't want to be locked down in a bad one. So I think it's really just this insightful, retrospective view of potential mates.
And maybe what's important considering what we're dealing with. I want to read you something from a 2015 article in Vanity Fair, and it was called Tinder and the Dawn of the Dating Apocalypse. I don't know if they were talking about the pandemic, but there you have it. The comparison to online shopping seems an apt one. Dating apps are the free market economy come to sex. The innovation of Tinder was a swipe, the flick of a finger on a picture, No more elaborate profiles necessary, and no more fear of rejection. Users only know whether they've been approved, never when they've been discarded. It's telling that swiping has become jocularly incorporated into advertisements for various products, a nod to the notion that online, the act of choosing consumer brands and sex partners has become interchangeable. Natasha, there have been a lot of criticisms that online dating has ruined intimacy and created a meaningless so-called hookup culture where people are easily replaceable. Now your only option in this pandemic, as we mentioned before, is to date online. How have these apps ultimately helped us or hurt us?
I think it depends. There are certain, because not every app is created in the same way, and they're not really speaking to or geared towards the same type of consumer either. So I think Tinder, and speaking specifically to Tinder, I think it was created for a very specific group or type of person who is looking more for that casual sort of hookup or a relationship that isn't necessarily going to be long term or a dating type of relationship. But addressing that idea of rejection, yeah, I think that the online dating scene does pose the opportunity for a lot of rejection. It's more, you're doing things with more quantity, more frequency, and it's the opportunity exists to be rejected on a more regular or frequent basis. On the other hand, you have it presents a medium to meet people. And as I said, there are different apps which you can use depending on what you're looking for. So there are those that are catering to and market themselves as apps that are for people who want to look for partnership, marriage, long-term relationships, whereas Tinder has been more stereotypically a hookup app. So I don't know that the apps themselves have necessarily created that shift. I actually think it was more a shift that was happening long before the apps were created and more a product of how we've changed as a culture over the past 25 to 50 some odd years that has really led up to a much more diversified and liberal approach to how we want our relationships to look.
And Rebecca, I want to ask you the same question. Do you think that online dating apps have hurt us or helped us?
I think a little bit of both. I think it's helped us. I think communicate with a wide range of people. I personally believe that it's cool to keep your options open instead of just limiting yourself to a small circle. But it's also hurt us in the sense that it's hard to know what the other person is looking for when you're only speaking, online. And sometimes online conversations can be very scratch the surface, a little bit shallow. You don't really get into more of the deep stuff so soon. So it's harder to know if you're on the same page with somebody.
Body language is very important. And Marianne, based on the literature out there, how does the relationship that started online compare to one that was sparked from an in-person interaction?
So that's a hard question to answer, only because it's sort of like an apples and oranges issue. Online dating has really picked up in popularity. And so if I say something about how long-term relationships are, do you mean 2 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road, right? But what I can say is that it's definitely a more popular way to meet someone for a long-term relationship. And it's increasing in its popularity, especially among older age groups. So it's something that I think a lot of people over 40 have been slowly gravitating towards over time. And we're seeing that trickling up now through the older age categories as well to a significant degree. But what I will say is that I'm an evolutionary psychologist, so I come from the background that these apps are created in a reflection of what we want, and that they didn't create what we want. They are being used by consumers who have a need and want to use them. And I think in terms of the long-term effects of meeting online, it's not really going to be much different, perhaps, than meeting someone in real life, because we still are the same people in many ways. We just are a little bit different in terms of our technology or our ability to ghost and those sorts of features. But I think fundamentally, we still want the same sorts of things, whether we meet someone next door or whether we meet someone online. And I think the pandemic has really highlighted what we said earlier, what we really want and need in a relationship.
And Natasha, I would like to ask you the same question.
I agree. The market is there to respond to what humans want and how we have changed. And we have certainly changed substantially, and the world around us responds. So the online world and having that as an option is, I think, certainly going to grow, projected to only grow, and but it doesn't replace the options that existed before it. It just adds a new dimension to where we're at in this moment in history and what people want. And we've stayed more the same, even though I said we've changed quite a bit. I actually think fundamentally we've stayed more the same in terms of what we want as human beings, our basic needs: love, connection, to belong, to be worthy, to feel worthy, to have people witness our lived experience. If we asked ourselves sort of in our older years and at the end of life, we want that sort of witness to our experience, to our existence. And that I don't think will ever change unless one day we turn into robots.
I'm getting all emotional listening to you because that's really what it is. People are looking for a connection. And Rebecca, I just wanted to ask you what you thought about what I just asked them both.
I agree with what they said. I think, especially during this time, during a pandemic, I think dating apps has really helped. You feel connected to people, even though you're not there in person. And I think that's really important, especially when you're kind of holed up alone, like in whatever location that you are. So wanting to feel, loved and needed and, wanting to belong, that's what makes us human. And I think dating apps has definitely helped us with feeling more connected with other people, even though you're not physically together.
Okay. And Natasha, I just want to ask you quickly, because I know a few of my friends are in long distance relationships where their partner is in the US, and because the border is shut, people can't cross the border. What's it been like for people who are dealing with long distance relationships, but they can't see each other?
I think it's certainly difficult. I mean, again, it's very human to miss someone you love. I mean, you feel that sense of the void, the longing. Those are very natural, very human emotions. I would just encourage those people to play the mental long game here. There will come a time, no one will keep you apart forever and forever. I mean, if your relationship is that serious, there will come a moment where you can come together again, either to visit or to relocate permanently somewhere if your relationship is that serious. And I would use it as an opportunity to really try and put a different spin on it. I actually had a situation like that, not that the border was closed, but my husband, I lived in the States and my husband lived here, and we were apart for 2 years. And that was 6 months after we met. I moved to the States to do my master's in psychology. And we used the opportunity to actually virtually date, funny enough, by phone and Skype. And we got to have conversations, really long conversations that, we might not necessarily have had otherwise in person. So I think it's an opportunity to also get to know your partner on a different level and a deeper level. And that's just one positive spin on it.
The website
And stay patient and stay strong.
The website Refinery29 had an article this past summer about dating, what it's like to date during the pandemic. And one of the daters that they profiled had this to say: I've been single for a year. I didn't really feel ready to date again until the new year, and then COVID happened. My worst interaction: I messaged this guy for over a month. He revealed a lot. I revealed a lot. Then we talked on the phone, and it was just all wrong. Shiver. I'd waited too long to make that critical transition from text to voice, and that was Marta. Rebecca, because of public health concerns, people seem to have opted for periods of where you're texting somebody over a long period of time before actually meeting in person. Has communicating virtually made dating easier or harder?
I think it's made communicating with another person a lot easier because I find that a lot of people are more comfortable with speaking online instead of face to face. It's a lot less intimidating. But then once you get too comfortable with speaking online and eventually you meet them in person, it depends on how comfortable you are with them and how comfortable you are with face-to-face interaction. And like that snippet you read there, it could all go south if you become, I guess, too comfortable with online communication and you just rely on that.
And Marianne, from the work that you're doing, have you found any kind of trepidation from the people that have filled out the survey about maybe people not being who they are online through the text messages as opposed to in real life?
That wasn't something our survey really is able to address, but I don't think that's anything to do with the pandemic per se, right? That's always the concern with online dating, and that's something that's really special about a virtual media. Like it's not, you can't really pretend to be someone that's very very different, at least in terms of appearance, when you meet someone in real life at the grocery store, for example. So it's definitely something to do with online dating per se. But what I will say that we do have data on is that the different dating apps are saying that about a third of participants, sometimes higher depending on the app, their membership, when they poll them, a third of them are willing to form a monogamous, exclusive relationship that's virtual only. And so they don't need to meet the person in real life. They think that they're going to get to know enough about the person that they would be willing to consider forming this exclusive monogamous relationship. And I think that's really telling about what we think we need to really have that sort of connection with somebody. And it's just, I don't know, I think it's really intriguing that, historically we've always held this idea of, well, if you have to meet someone in real life, you have to smell them, see how they move, see how they sound, all those sorts of really important things. And as a psychologist, I absolutely believe that's true. But it's interesting that we're beginning to think about boiling a relationship down into this very core element of connection. And I think the pandemic has especially brought that to light for us.
And Natasha, we've got about 20 seconds. Any advice on someone navigating the dating world during this pandemic?
Yes, treat the online dating world as respectfully and with as much integrity as you would if you were meeting in person. So show up on time, make sure your Wi-Fi connection is good. Don't be coming on and off screen. Just be respectful and be open and yeah, and be available, be open, and be on time.
Thank you so much for this conversation to all three of you. It's been very insightful, and stay safe. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.